my needle drops, and Joel. How you doing? Haven't really talked to you in a while, haven't responded to you in a while, and I figure recent events make it sort of necessary to make a video, say something about what's just happened this past weekend. But first I wanted to address a few things in the video that you previously made in response to my church's video talking about some of the sexually explicit messages, some of the harassment that's sort of been thrown the band's way via social media by fans. There is still a double standard right now in terms of how male fans can interact with female musicians, and it sort of seems like everybody shrugs their shoulders and thinks that, well, that's just the way things are, that's just how men are. People who are famous are supposed to sort of accept people crapping on them in the public eye over social media because people who are famous have been harassed for decades upon decades upon decades. And to directly answer your question about why I think some stories like this aren't really widespread in the press, it's just because those standards are there and because people aren't getting offended by this stuff, or they don't really perceive it to be entirely wrong, or they think that it's something that in time isn't really going to resolve itself. And, you know, that may be the case for right now, but into the future, I hope that us discussing issues like this makes people think twice about, I don't know, sending somebody who is in the public eye a really stupid, heartless message for no other reason than to get a quick misogynistic thrill. Moving on to something that needs to be discussed, the passing of rock legend Lou Reed. A lot of people have been sending me tweets, messages, emails, asking me if I'm going to talk about this, sort of telling me their perception of the whole thing, how upset a lot of people are. And personally, I'm not really the type of person who gets worked up over the passing of someone who I didn't know personally. Obviously, sympathy is there, but in a way, Lou Reed will always be alive to me to some extent, because I love the guy's music, I love a lot of the guy's records, and I'll always have that to listen to. And the impact that that music has had on my life is always going to be there. That's never going to change. The fact that he is now gone, that's not erased. And all I can really say about Lou and his legacy and his discography is just how it's all impacted me personally. Some people, you know, they get their minds blown when they figure out that they like hip-hop, or they like punk, or they like jazz, or they like classical, or they like whatever genre, and it seems like there's this whole new world open for them. That's what getting into the first 4 studio albums from the Velvet Underground was like for me. To me, the Velvet Underground represented this new league of edginess in rock and roll, even though during their time they weren't quite as appreciated as they were later in retrospect, because not only are there really strong elements of well-written and catchy and fun rock and roll on these records, but there are some really beautiful love songs on there, ballads, drones, experimental spots, just straight up noise rock, really interesting moments of spoken word, and some really great stories in a lot of the lyrics here, because if Lou Reed will be remembered for anything into the future, it's a lot of the tales and a lot of the very grim images that came up in his lyrics as well. And of course, you know, we have to attribute a lot of the experimentation and the adventure in the Velvet Underground's music to the other members of the Velvet Underground, but still, that experimentation and that will to push boundaries and do something different carried on into Lou Reed's solo career as well, as he was making some really solid art rock and glam rock records, as well as incorporating elements of spoken word and poetry into his LPs, like with the album New York or The Raven. And then we have his very experimental forays, such as Metal Machine music. And you can't deny that the guy was a risk taker all the way up until the end, especially with the Metallica collaboration that he recently did with the album Lulu, an album that I personally feel, and you can check my review, I still don't feel like it's that bad. And you know what, even though over the course of his discography and his career, Lou did have some records that weren't so hot, had records that were really misses in comparisons to his hits, but you know, the hits that he did have were so deafeningly great, I can't see why he won't be remembered for them and be remembered for his influence on rock music in general in the foreseeable future. And Joel, I'm just kind of wondering, mostly because of my reaction to this, when a legend such as Lou Reed passes and he's no longer with us, and essentially with that comes the guarantee that we're not going to get any brand new music and we're not going to see him evolve anymore as an artist. How does that make you feel? Do you feel personally upset? Does a guy like Lou Reed leaving the planet cause you to reflect upon his discography, sort of his wider impact on the world of music? And of course that goes for everybody who's watching this too. Let me know what you thought of Lou Reed's music. How did it impact your life? Did this recent news event sort of cause you to go back and listen to his old solo stuff? Listen to the Velvet Underground? Are you a new listener to Lou Reed's music? And if so, what's your perception of it? Anthony Fantano, Reflections, forever.